What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from RC Nightmare. I don't know how this is going to sound, how echo it is, but I'm working on a new setup. Came out to my man cave to do this. This is the Traxxas Maxx Slash. Now, this is a rig that, for me, there's really only 3 or 4 form factors that you can ever really expect. You've got your monster trucks, you got your short course trucks, you got your buggies, you got your scalers, and kind of everything else, at least in terms of a basher. Sure, you've got on-road and you've got all sorts of other, boats and things like that. When you get into Traxxas, the Slash is iconic. It's always been iconic. It's what everybody knows. This scale of the Traxxas Slash is one that I've been waiting for a really long time because I'm fortunate and I have a lot of area to run it. That's the big thing when you get into these larger scale RCs. Yeah, they're cool. I mean, you can look at, I've got the low C 4th scale up here, gas, but you need a ton of room to run that. That's why stuff like 10th scale short course trucks are so popular. You can run them inside, you can run them outside. You don't need to have a huge area to do it. Same thing with buggies. Sure, you could get down to 8th scale, but if you have an 8th scale buggy and you're bashing that thing, you need a lot of room for maximum jumps and things of that nature. Well, this is the Slash Max, which is basically the Traxxas Max, shrunk down into a short course truck form factor. It can go up to 6S speed, 2 3S or one single 6S, and it can reach speeds of 70 miles an hour, of course, with their, when you have a pinion gear change, things of that nature. Now, comes in 3 or 4 colors. I never really concern myself too much with color. I mean, if I have a personal preference, it's going to be black and orange. That's the color that I like. But here is the Slash Maxx Slash, and this is the rock and roll finish. It's a pretty cool truck. I'm gonna see if I can actually just zoom in a little bit here because so this is the Maxx Slash or Slash Max, which is essentially like I would say 5th scale. It's not 4th scale. You could argue maybe it's 6th scale. Traxxas is always kind of weird about saying exactly what scale stuff is, but this is it. It's a Slash. It's not, shouldn't be mind-blowing you. It's a Slash with, max form factor with essentially Slash features. As a short course truck, you see a LCG, low center of gravity chassis, which is a must. One of the things I'm noticing, unfortunately, with this rig is the amount of rollovers that it's having. Some of that's going to come from the sway bar that's not included, which should be included in my opinion. And shock oil, different stuff like tougher springs, things of that nature that it doesn't have on launch. So I want to get into that, but let me get this beast unclipped. These are probably the best iteration of the body clips to date. They've got the remote hidden in here, which we'll get to in a little bit. So this is it. This is the Slash Maxx Slash, so to speak. Not a lot that's going to look extremely different to you. You're going to have, essentially your 6S power system that you have in, the Sledge. Something like the Sledge is going to be very close to this, which I have behind me right there. You're going to have, obviously waterproof, which is, a benefit that Traxxas kind of has always led the market on. One of the things that people have talked about is the shock length in the rear and just how how easily it bottoms out. Now, I would argue that makes it for a bad bashing experience. You don't want to have a lot of rollovers in general. You don't. You just want cool stuff. You want things to look good. You want things to run good. You don't want to be picking up your RC constantly, but that's the nature of the beast with this one thus far. Now there are things you can do. Obviously they're going to have the sway bars, you know, the sway bar stuff, and you can obviously have a better setup on the shock oil and things of that nature. But the drawback to a bigger RC, which a lot of people tend to ask, is, you know, well, obviously it's more expensive. It's $700 roughly. And it doesn't come with a battery, which is going to be another couple $100 if you don't have batteries already. If you're like me and you have a RC collection problem, it's not that big a deal. You have batteries everywhere. The one gripe I'll also put out is this is the battery box. Okay, this is where you put your batteries, a single 3S or two 3Ss or a single 6S. The problem with this, I like the rigid design, I do, but what you have is a battery box that is not, how do I put this? I don't want to ascribe malice where, what's that saying? You don't want to ascribe malice where ineptitude could be the reason, but here you have a battery box that is not super forgiving, meaning the Traxxas batteries fit great. Of course they do. They want, you know, I suspect Traxxas makes more money off selling a couple of 6S batteries than they do off selling this kit. It's just like in the old days where, you know, Hewlett Packard and other printer companies, they didn't make much money on the printers, but they made money on the ink cartridges. I suspect it's a similar business model for Traxxas with their with their batteries. So it is a gripe of mine. This does not, like if you have a bunch of 6S laying around, there's a good chance it's not going to fit in there off the jump street, which sucks. If you have the Traxxas batteries, you're obviously going to be fine. A couple other design things I want to note. They moved the servo placement up here to the top where it was down below, I believe, on the sledge. Fortunately, I have one right here. Yeah, it's down in there on the sledge. So, I mean, you end up, you know, taking a little bit more damage. I like the placement. I like the change there. I like that. Everything else is basically the same. You know, your low center of gravity. You've got your wheelie bar in the back here. The shocks, everything I'm reading, everything I've seen from running videos, these shocks are substandard. At least out of the box, you're going to want to stiffen them up. You're going to want to increase the shock oil weight because it's just, you know, bottoming out. And the sway bars are an absolute must from everything I've seen. I've seen a lot of running videos of this, and this thing rolls over way too much. Way too much for a $700 RC that's a short course truck. Granted, if you're, you know, I understand the position where some people say, bro, that should be included in a $700 RC, at least the sway bars. And I would agree with you 100% because the Traxxas Slash is a basher. For whatever reason, it seems like they set this up for exclusively short course dirt track racing, and that's it. These tires are almost like an on-road tire. They're not going to do awesome in bashing. It's going to slide around a lot, which is a departure for me. Most people who have Slashes, and especially if you're going to go to this large-scale four-wheel drive stuff, you want to get out in the yard, dirt, rocks, and just rip it, right? Well, these tires aren't going to be great for that. So, you know, again, I try to be honest. You know, I pay for my RCs. I don't get them a week early, so I get all the free views. And, you know, Traxxas is never going to probably send me one because, you know, I will, in general, call out stuff I don't like. But I will say, in general, I do love Traxxas. Now, in terms of a large-scale, similar option, I mean, you've got something from Losi, which we actually haven't even unboxed yet. And you've got, obviously, the other options, but I'm looking at the Big Rock from Arma as another one in this kind of realm. And then you've got the Baja Ray, also in the same kind of price range. I think out of the box, those vehicles were actually better bashers, which is shocking to say for Losi because, or for Traxxas, because that literally never happens. But I don't want to just focus on negatives. Look, here's the reality, okay? You buy this truck, you're going to put a few bucks into a sway bar, which should have been included for $700, okay? I don't think anyone would argue with that, including Traxxas, which is odd why they didn't include it, you know, to be honest with you. I know it's kind of hard to see against, you know, it's still an awesome truck. I've got some issue with the spring in the back, not really sitting right. So you buy this truck, you're gonna spend another $100 for batteries if you don't have them already, which is true of, you know, back in the day, these trucks used to be quote unquote ready to run. For me, ready to run means it comes with a remote and or batteries. But the kit, the truck itself, seems well made. It has a lot of your standard, you know, Traxxas quality. I think if I was gonna bash, okay, I think that the Slash really wants to be this big. I think while the 10 scale Slash is probably perfect, a little bit more size on the Slash really, I think, will unlock a lot of bashing potential. The only problem is it's at the higher end of the price market. I think if this was $599 instead of $699 or close to $700, that would have been better. Or if it was $700 and a little better tuned, right? Like it had taken into, you know, they had actually run the dang thing and seen that it rolls over if a light breeze happens. That probably would have been nice. If they would have hooked it up already with the sway bars, that would have been nice. So there's two options there, obviously. The wheelie bar, I don't care about. I don't do wheelies with RCs. I do big jumps and I bash. But, you know, your mileage may vary. Overall, in this kind of bigger RC world where you've got stuff like the Big Rock, which I think is an awesome kit. You can't see it, but it's down on the floor. I have the Super Baja Ray, which is also an awesome kit. If you put this next to something that's 10th scale, okay? Let's grab this Rustler Ultimate, for example. You'll see that it's significantly bigger. Now, I think the Rustler is obviously a great form factor for bashing, but it kind of, you know, you kind of want a little more ground clearance, beefiness. So you're gonna see this thing is pretty big when you're gonna go from 10 scale up to this, which is, you know, Traxxas is always cagey about saying exactly what it is. You know, it's gonna be 6 scale, it's gonna be 7 scale, whatever they wanna say. I actually absolutely love the Rustler, and I predict they're gonna make a Rustler version like this, just like Traxxas does, because that's what Traxxas does. They blow out every form factor they can ad nauseum, and then keep selling it back to us. This, let's say, wrap it up, Jeremy, you're talking too much. Is it worth $700? No, it isn't, okay? There's a couple reasons why I don't love the truck at $700, which I've mentioned. I don't think it's tuned properly for bashing. I think it could have had better bashing tires. These are light complaints. If you're a heavy hitter in RC and you want to spend, you don't need another $100 to get ready. The shock oil thing, whatever, most guys have shock oil around, that's not that big of a deal. And plus you'll want to dial it in exactly how you want. The biggest gripe to me is the tires aren't great, which I get it is not a huge deal. And I think the shocks aren't ideal, and it needs sway bars. But outside of that, if this truck was $599, I'd say it's great. Does that mean you shouldn't buy it? No, it just means when you go in and you're already paying $700, you can basically plan on spending another $100. Just get the sway bars right away, and then if you bash, if you're in the mud and dirt and rocks and you know all this kind of stuff, really consider picking up an extra pair of tires, which again, that's like another 60, 70 bucks too, right? So if it's your first RC, right, you're $100 for batteries and a charger, maybe more. Another $100 for tires and shock oil, and another $100 for the sway bars, wherever they're gonna charge for that. So, I mean, you're into this thing for $900. It's not, I mean, my first car was a 1996 Ford Tempo, and I think it was $1,500. And I drove that thing places that weren't in my backyard, right? I think I also touched a boob in that car, which is pretty sweet. Probably not gonna do that in this truck. But, do I think that this has a ton of potential? Yes. If you're not as budget conscious, you're gonna love this truck. If you're on a budget, there are other options that I think that are in the larger scale that need less. You know, the Ray, obviously stuff like the Big Rock I think is really awesome. just kind of looking around and everything. There's a lot. Also, just a 10 scale Slash, if you don't have super long grass and you don't have all this kind of stuff going on, you're gonna love it. But overall, I'd say that it's a pretty nice rig. I see a ton of potential with it. Just like always, I'm looking at it thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to put 200 bucks into this thing and then it's really gonna rip. And because I already had batteries, it's good. Does that make sense? I don't wanna be too rough on it because I think it has a lot of potential. The shock thing is a pretty easy fix. The sway bars should have been included. The tires might just be personal preference. Maybe you have a nice clean dirt track or road that you're gonna run it on. You don't care that much about off-roading. But for me, as a hard basher, straight up basher, I want something more off-road. But you know what? I'm gonna get different tires on this thing. I'm gonna put the sway bar on the thing. I'm gonna set up the shocks right. It's gonna take less than an afternoon and this thing's gonna be a heck of a lot of fun. I can guarantee it. Did you pick up the Maxx Slash? What do you think? You think it's a sweet truck? What would you rather get if you didn't get it? And I guess let me know in the comment section down below and we'll talk to you again real soon.